Welcome to the Alliance for Digital Equity and our presentation on the set of programs we're getting ready to implement, funded by the Massachusetts Broadband Institute Digital Equity Partnership Programs. Now, Massachusetts Broadband Institute is known as, in shorthand, as MBI. So I want to tell you a little bit about Mass Broadband Institute because they are the funding and our state partner in this work. I've already welcomed you. Welcome again. I'm Frank Robinson. I'm the Vice President for Public Health for Baystate Health. And Baystate is the sort of backbone support or the fiscal agent for the Alliance. And the Alliance itself is a regional coalition of organizations and advocates from across Western Mass, Franklin, Hamden, Hampshire, and Berkshire County. We're going to talk specifically about our history, a little bit about how we came to be, but specifically, there are a set of digital equity partnership programs that are critical to your understanding because we're inviting your participation in those programs. And then we're going to tell you a little bit about where we're going in terms of next steps. So big picture, I want to let you know who we are in relationship to federal, and state, and local initiatives. This is your first step towards joining this network, and so we see this as an organizing step for ourselves and for you. And then there are a specific set of programs we're launching, and I want you to imagine your roles and responsibilities in those programs. And again, we're going to talk about gearing up the next steps. So let me begin with the Massachusetts Broadband Institute. Now, the Institute itself, MBI, is a program of the Massachusetts Technology Collaborative. And MTC, or Massachusetts Technology Collaborative, has a series of programs of which the Mass Broadband Institute is one of those programs. So again, that's for context. The Mass Broadband Institute, just for you to anchor it a little bit, so you're perhaps familiar with the middle mile and last mile programs. And so this agency was responsible for that. I'm going to give you a glimpse of what that's about. And then there are two new programs that are emerging. And they are both federal programs that were established to make investments in digital equity and digital equity infrastructure at a state level. And so those are the planning processes, and I'll talk a little bit about that. Those planning processes, I would say, trickle down and show up at the local level in terms of two digital equity programs. One is Municipal Digital Equity Planning Program, and that is any municipality in the Commonwealth can access resources to develop their own digital equity plan. And so we're working alongside MBI in supporting that initiative. However, our particular set of programs have to do with a digital equity partnership program. And so again, we'll talk about those programs in particular, and your invitation to participate is really at that one. So last mile program, look at those green and yellow communities. They were the last mile towns that were identified in rural and central Massachusetts that lacked any connectivity to the internet. Today, I think there's somewhere around 96% or better of connections to all municipalities. So that's a big piece of the MBI history. They now have pivoted towards digital equity at a local level. How do you actually use broadband in a way that makes sense? So MBI also is leading major statewide planning effort in response to two federal programs, the Digital Equity Act and the Broadband Equity Access Deployment. So these are two federal programs intended to deliver the partnership programs I'm going to describe, as well as come up with a plan for adding and directing new resources to our communities. This planning process is roughly going on between now through the end of this year, with a 5-year plan to be established that would drive future development and also become the mechanism by which the state and Mass Tech Collaborative will allocate additional resources to continue the work we began, as well as the unfinished work of building out connectivity in terms of infrastructure across the state. So stay tuned for that work. So let me sort of wrap up the second major initiative that MBI is driving, and that's the Digital Equity Partnership Programs. And this is the crux of the work that the Alliance is leading in Western Massachusetts. So as you can note here, there are 6 programs. We are involved in 4 of the 6 programs. So if you look at the top 4 programs, digital literacy, connectivity, public space, internet modernization, and education and outreach, those are programs we are actually directly responsible for implementing. The last 2 programs, device distribution and refurbishment and Wi-Fi access and housing, those are 2 programs that are yet to be funded. Very likely will be statewide programs where those resources will be available to Western Mass, but the programs will be delivered by a vendor that's very likely to cover the full state. So those are the digital equity partnership programs in total. And so I want to now shift to a discussion of just what the partnership programs are in relationship to the Alliance and our aim to build out this network of collaborating organizations. So you're looking at my favorite slide because I like the animation here. There's to the left here, this definition of digital equity. And so that definition is one that's being adopted and used by Mass Broadband Institute. So we've adopted and are applying that same digital equity definition to our work. To provide a bit more illustration, if you look to the bridge that's being constructed, the digital equity bridge, it really communicates fully what we intend. And that is by closing divides and building a structure that is creating policies and sort of baking in solutions, we actually move folks towards digital equity. So that's our picture of where we're going and how we're going to get there. We're going to close divides and we're going to create digital equity solutions. So let me take a big step backwards just to give you context for how we came to be, put some perspective on this work. We began this work May, August of 2020, a heavy planning process involving hundreds of people in the region in the beginning of the pandemic, which was our start. Our process really has sort of 3 steps. We call it discover, dream, do something. Our discovery phase is really a needs assessment process, and we did a formal needs assessment. And if you look off to the right on this slide, the digital divide and challenges of digital equity was a published needs assessment that we've used to guide our planning and the development of a set of initiatives. We are moving towards the do something phase. That is that we're in this March to July 1 phase of actually standing up digital equity partnership programs funded by the Mass Broadband Institute. So again, I want to provide some context. The Alliance is 3 years old, and we've taken progressive and deliberate actions gearing up to do something about digital divides and moving all people in our region towards digital equity. So in that planning process, we made a critical and really pretty deliberate decision to create a community action planning framework with 3 sort of pillars: access, adoption, and application. And then you can sort of read for yourself the sub items that sort of fall under those titles. And our understanding, and the understanding that we've learned over the last 3 years, is that devices, issues of access, skills, that work really needs to be braided, interconnected, and consequently, within any one of those three buckets, we could be doing something with access, literacy, and devices. So again, think of those buckets, those categories of braided resources being offered to the public in a way that actually moves them towards digital equity. So let me be really concrete with you now. A lot of background and context, but here are the 4 program areas that we've adopted. So if you remember the previous slide from MBI, we were supported and funded to provide 4 programs. Connectivity, which is broadband connectivity, that is individuals that are housing unstable, homeless, they may be from resettlement communities or resettlement populations, new Americans, someone moving recently into domestic violence shelter, folks that are not connected to broadband and require some special assistance in that sense. So that's the connectivity program. We have a modernization, and that is modernization of those public spaces to make them Wi-Fi connected. Imagine libraries, community centers, shelter settings, as well as public parks being Wi-Fi enabled to provide full access to a population. The digital skills area is just what it says. How do we basically equip folks with the skills they need in order to utilize the devices for those basic and fundamental needs and resources. And then outreach and enrollment, which is really our attempt to connect individuals, low-income individuals, to a great resource. The Federal Communications Commission has an affordable connectivity program, which will provide $30 a month to eligible households, and that has the effect of, for some folks, giving them free Wi-Fi, for other folks, reducing their overall broadband bill by $30. So those are the 4 programs that we're standing up as part of our partnership program. As I noted earlier, these programs are not freestanding, but we imagine these services being braided together, interconnected. This Venn diagram here actually speaks to how we would see that happening. It's hard to imagine someone being enrolled in an affordable connectivity program who may not have had broadband, newly enrolled, would also need some support around digital skills training. They may be in a community setting or a community center or public housing, but with that site also then requires modernization of spaces. So we're imagining these programs happening not singularly, but really in a braided fashion where a beneficiary or a particular setting will experience more than one of these programs. Consequently, collaboration, intentional networking, and the developing of shared goals and results is sort of the glue factor that sort of knit this collaborative approach together. Again, what you get what you design for is specifically meant to create designs that are uniquely based on where people live. So think of this as a locality-based strategy, designing for each local community. The other element is that we're asking folks to think about coloring outside their lines. And so this notion of braiding resources really is a very practical solution for how do we deliver this new resource to people differently in a way that is fully accessible to them. And so this example we offer to the right is a real example. It's a project that's currently underway in Hamden County at the Palmer Libraries. So young people have been recruited as cyber tutors through a program that we are operating called Cyber Seniors. They're supporting members from an older adults digital equity network, and that network is a network we've organized to serve older adults. They are now referring people, as well as council on agents, to library or training places where the library digital equity networks library workers are organizing to provide access to training for the community. So in this one example here, coloring outside the lines, meaning we have community-based organizations serving young people working and being trained by cyber seniors, involved with another network organized by us to address older adults, connecting to another network of library workers. And so this coloring outside the lines produces a service that directly is tailored to the needs of individuals. So we're asking folks to think about this as a way of entering this digital equity partnership program collaboratively, with intention and with shared goals and results. So let me catch my breath a little bit here. I've been talking nonstop, but the digital equity ecosystem, great label. We picked that up and have borrowed that from MBI, but it's really a practical way of taking a look at what we're trying to create. And so we have the 4 programs. We have a set of organizations that are committed to deliver or lead in those spaces, those 4 programs. And the expectation is that we're, again, mixing and matching resources around the needs of an individual. In addition to those 4 programs, Baystate, as I described earlier, we provide backbone support, which is financial management and administrative support to the Alliance, to the 4 network. And we're in the process of developing a virtual resource center. And that is a set of resources that will be used across the region and across all the programs. So this is our emerging ecosystem, if you will. And we'll ask you to imagine an additional set of organizations that are not listed here, but are connected to these organizations as sub-recipients of grants or having received additional awards. A classic example for that is behind each of these initiatives might stand a set of libraries or a set of other community-based organizations that are working with specific populations. So that's our digital equity ecosystem. Your invitation to join has been extended. So I want to just sort of begin to wrap this presentation up with giving you a sense of the focus in terms of this intervention. The who is served, and this is really services really targeting folks that are most likely to experience digital inequities. And so there's a certain bias here in how we allocate the resources, as well certain, I would call it, not bias, but a certain commitment and investment to be sure that all folks on the margin, in particular low-income populations, have full access to digital skills and tools and resources. Consequently, when you look at the funding and the eligibility for this program, Mass Broadband Institute and the Federal Communications Commission are directing resources principally to serve populations that we know are likely to be experiencing the greatest inequities. And so those 4 programs are anyone qualifying for TAN, for temporary assistance for needy families, SNAP resources, supplemental nutrition assistance. All those programs, folks are immediately eligible. If you look at the bottom left-hand corner, there are those households and communities that are at or below 300% of the poverty level. And those income levels are pretty generous. And so in some ways, this program serves low and moderately income individuals. They're all eligible under the SEC requirements and funding, as well as under mass broadband. We've also received additional funding from our local communities. So Baystate Health's Community Benefits Program has made a grant available. And then a set of local foundations, Davis Community Foundation, Mass Mutual, Beverage Foundation, have also made funding available. So we have a nice mix of public-private dollars that will allow us to serve all people in the region. And then lastly, on this eligibility side, is that the Mass Broadband Institute funds are specifically designed to address whole communities where those communities have a specific federal designation or state designation. So Springfield, Holyoke, Chicopee, and Pittsburgh are gateway cities. Any resident living in those cities is eligible. Adams, North Adams, South Adams, and Greenfield have what's called qualified census tracts. Those areas are designated by housing and urban development as low and moderate income communities that have a high need. Any resident in any of these qualified census tracts or gateway cities are immediately eligible for services. So that's the sense of targeting that's going on within MBI. I'm going to wrap up now with next steps. We're gearing up for action, and in gearing up for action, we're formalizing who we are as a coalition, and we're beginning our what we would call our first quarter planning. Now, this is a 2-year program that we segmented into 8 quarters. Our first quarter is April through June 30th. And so we're in our plan for planning phase. We're beginning to contract with programs right now, and we're registering those programs as part of our grant management program. So we're doing some of the administrative, or I would say bureaucratic steps necessary for moving towards implementation. And so in closing, just give you a sense of the next step for the Alliance for Digital Equity. We're formalizing our coordinating committee. Baystate's a member of this alliance as a fiscal agent, backbone support, and then we're providing specific focused engagement, particularly around those partnership programs that are funded to deliver those 4 programs of connectivity, digital skills and literacy, modernization, and ACP outreach. Broadly engage our community stakeholders and advocates that are in the room at the table, part of the alliance, because they know something has to happen to create equity and to eliminate divides. And then we have consumer and other advocates right alongside them, staking out a position in the alliance to help us move all people towards digital equity. So we're in this organizing fashion, and this more specific and deliberate framework will show up as the guiding body for the alliance over the next 3 months. And as I stated, we're in this first quarter of gearing up, getting ready to take action. So staffing, nuts and bolts, action planning, and then forecasting where we're going into the future. All that work is going on now, April through June 30th. And on July 1, the beginning of our second quarter, we'll recast a plan of action, and we'll be fully into implementation activity. So that's the game plan.